To introduce myself, my name is Xiang. I'm the only Chinese here with not like $1 trillion in my pocket. I come from a small mobile game studio right now, and we're making strategy mobile games. I'm also a venture partner in a Chinese angel fund, helping them identify game, mobile ads, VR companies in Silicon Valley. I'm going to let my panel guests introduce themselves because they can do a much better job.
So should I start?
Yes, Jeremy, please.
So I'm Jeremie Kletzkine. I'm from Israel. I am actually VP of business development in an organization called Startup Nation Central. And we map and understand the ecosystem of innovation in Israel. And we also help big corporations to engage with innovation in Israel. Beyond that, I'm also a co-founder of GameIs, which is the Israeli Game Development and Game Industry Association. And I have a past as being the head of business development in a company called PrimeSense, which was acquired by Apple, and we actually developed the technology in the Kinect, the 3D sensing technology in the Kinect. So that's in a nutshell who I am.
My name is Bendov. I'm CEO of SIDEKICK Games. We're a mobile game developer out of Tel Aviv, working for clients like Rovio, DNA, Google, and Intel.
My name is Ying. I work with CV Capital. We're a Shanghai-based investment bank that brokers late-stage investment and M&A deals coming out of China. So some of our recent deals, App11 for $1.4 billion, Media.net for $890, also Smato and Spigot within the last couple of months. Previously, I led publishing and investment teams with Six Waves, Tango, and Gree.
And I'm Barak, Rabinowitz. I'm a partner with F2 Capital. We're a new fund focused at the seed stage, backing frontier technology companies before traditional VCs are ready to invest. Previously, I was heading 3 game studios and invested in companies like Optimove.
In order to talk about what's going to be the next big thing, next big breakthrough in game industry, where all the entrepreneurs in the room should focus their energy on, a question for the panel guest. What is your favorite innovation in game industry in the past 10 years? What is the thing that made you really excited when it came out? It was like, yeah. Past 10 years. Who want to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
The most exciting thing is having way more people playing, having games as a media way more accessible for people, mostly through smartphones. I think it was a huge breakthrough and the opportunity for, so many more people to enjoy games and to do business around them, like this conference.
Okay.
For me, it was the Wii. Just because they got an emerging platform right, and it showed us what's possible, and later we see it with PrimeSense, and thanks to you, and it was a lot of fun.
I think for me, it's the adding the social layer on top of a lot of these games. So especially whether it's PC games or mobile, I think the addition to whether it's a clan system or group systems where not only the gameplay itself, but kind of the meta game of whether you're playing with friends or playing with clans and having clans compete with each other, it really allows kind of the user base to create content above what the developers themselves design.
To piggyback a little bit, Jim used to work for Six Waves. Six Waves I don't know now, but used to be the leading social game company in Asia.
I'm extremely excited by, actually I think games are the best cultural content today. I think you have better storylines, deeper characters than in movies, than in TV shows, and that's what is really exciting me. With this media, with music added to storylines, and of course all of the graphic design, everything around. Today you have the best content that can be delivered for people to enjoy. So this is I think what really exciting me when I see games like Witcher, or I think that people who are not playing are just missing the best entertaining experience of the decade, and I feel bad for them.
Well, when Kinect came out, I was really excited. And I thought it was going to be huge. And we actually I used to work for Microsoft at that time. I did a little demo where we can use Kinect to control the operating room. The doctors can use gesture. And it wasn't as big as I anticipated, which just shows how well I can predict things. But that was something I was really excited. Now, going back to the panel, what do you guys think is going to change the landscape of game in the, right now? What's exciting for you now?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Actually, I know a bit about hardware development, and I don't expect much innovation soon in hardware. I think the cycles for developing hardware is very complicated. You have a lot of challenges to overcome. You have to have to control a full ecosystem of developers and to have an install base, and there is a chicken and egg all the time to bring new hardware into the arena. What I really believe is going to change the gaming industry in the coming 5 years, it's software. It's software technology. Of course, software content, software that actually affects the gameplay, that optimize technologies like video streaming inside VR or behavior analytics and predictions in order to outsmart the players with emotions, with their behavior inside the games. And this is, I think, the biggest challenge that today the industry is facing. It's it's a software layer, and it's shorter cycles, and it's going to fit actually the development cycles of mobility as well. That's my.
What about Gay? What do you think?
There are two things that I'm very excited about. One is, in the short term, in the next 2-3 years. One is real-time multi-user. That's very much personal. So running from our mobile phone, I think that will have a huge impact on the game market. And it's fun. It's already a proven way to engage people for, more people for a longer time. Anything that's happening now with VR and AR, I think that's a bit of a longer term, but it's very, very exciting now to see that developing kind of as a second step from 3D interfaces to have 3D displays, although it's 360 and full VR, but it goes so well together. So I'm very excited to see how that develops in the next decade.
Jim?
I think certainly there's a good amount of investment and discussion and talk about the VR, AR side. A lot of strong teams and companies are investing in developing content. I think there's certainly a lot of uncertainty around monetization models or what the adoption rate for the platforms are going to be. But from an excitement level, I think a lot of folks, and myself included, are excited to see what types of experiences people are building for VR initially and then AR down the line.
There's an expression in a gold rush: be the guy selling the shovels, not digging for gold. So for me, I'm actually not betting on games. I'm zooming out and saying, what are the big trends right now? And everyone can see Uber, for example. And the next is autonomous vehicles. What's going to happen when you have autonomous vehicles? You can have a lot more time and attention on your hands, for example, to play games. So there's an Israeli startup, brand new, called En Route, which is delivering content for autonomous vehicles. Or if we just take it back down to earth, I've noticed that my friends who play clan-based strategy games are doing a lot of their chatting outside of the game, under the table at dinner time, just telling their friends when they're going to get in to plan an attack. So there's another Israeli company called Clan Chat, and I think that these are all smart plays and are a bit agnostic on which content will hit.
When you say selling tools for gold digging, can you be more specific? What are the investment that you've made or things that you're paying attention to right now?
In terms of tools, ecosystem plays?
Ecosystem plays and tools and basically the shovel.
Well, for example, I talked about Optimove. What did Optimove do? It started in the games industry, and it analyzed a game's player database and segmented the players into different values and predicted who is going to be a high-value player in the future and ensure each one gets the right marketing message. They then took that and applied it to e-commerce and are having a lot of success.
So you're saying that they're taking game users and and channel them to e-commerce products?
Taking the systems, methodologies, another company called Panelist, it's actually my former head of analytics, he just saw that game companies have huge analytic needs. The successful game companies are the ones who control their data. So he just extracted that layer and offered it as a service to all kinds of companies, dating applications, again, e-commerce. Anyone can benefit from the skills we develop in the games industry.
This is actually a very interesting conversation because big game companies all develop that core piece of technology in-house. And smaller, mid-sized and smaller game companies, while they really need that, they don't really have a lot of money to pay for it. So how do you see this catch-22?
Well, it's a great question. So you can easily work with indie developers, but at a certain point, you're right. When they get too big, they don't need you or don't want to depend on you anymore. So that's where you can start looking outside of the games industry. For example, one of our themes is innovation-starved markets. So take insurance. Insurance is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, still very old-fashioned in their approach. For example, when you apply for an insurance policy, you still very often fill in a paper questionnaire asking you questions about your behavior. Well, you could imagine, techniques to gamify that experience, to get more information out of people so they're more honest or complete more forms, have higher completion rates, faster completion rates, are engaging with you when something happens in real time because you're rewarding them. So I think you can move horizontally to deal with that chicken and egg problem into other industries.
Move horizontally. That's very interesting.
I think you do bring a good point where, I think everyone understands at this point how competitive mobile games is. And one of the key points that everyone raises is the rising cost of user acquisition. But one thing that isn't talked about as much is the challenge of managing all this data and managing all of the user acquisition channels that successful companies have to deal with. And so if you look at some of the big players out there, Kabam, Gree, Machine Zone, they all have very, very large teams that are not only developing the games, but also analyzing the data that comes in. And for a smaller team, that's just not possible, right? So to the degree that there are third-party or middleware platforms that allow smaller teams to really process this data and leverage it to build their business, I think those would be valuable tools.
If you're big enough, very soon when you publish a game, you understand that the core team that developing the game itself is actually needs a lot of help around it. Yeah. And the bigger the game, you actually need to invest more in all those ancillary tools and services. And those tools are very relevant to other products and other markets and other ecosystems because they are tools that help you either to attract or manage your audience better, to keep them, to monetize them, etc., helping you with marketing. But then there's also some really interesting opportunities in deep diving into that, data or into those tools, really figuring out those smart shovels, right, that can either be implemented to other products and verticals, but also be smarter in digging deeper and understanding the specifics of different audiences or niches or cohorts is super interesting to see how that's developing now.
Have you seen any, obviously Israel is a very tight, compact country. So have you seen any company that are in this vertical or have done something very special in this field?
I've seen that the first place I've seen it actually as part of internal teams within bigger companies. Just the use of algorithms to automate different processes and figure out where they can be better, whether it's marketing or keeping their users in, was really interesting. And the more you have that, and Israel is definitely leading with certain markets like social gaming, you have teams that go out and create startups and services around that.
When you're a smaller company and you don't have access to information, to understanding, you have to be creative. And usually innovation comes from smaller companies by definition, because bigger companies, they just see the problems and they usually are front-facing issues. So I do believe that there is a lot of room for smaller companies if they are creative, if they know how to tackle the problem in a different ways that is more scalable, and that's how they will survive and ultimately maybe become bigger companies or collaborate with bigger companies. So I do believe that there is, in these ecosystems of innovations, it's always transfer of knowledge, information, and they need each other's. The big companies need the small companies, and the small companies need the big companies.
Interesting. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about the word gamification anymore.
Spoke about insurance.
The insurance is actually a very interesting example. I personally have been paying attention to this specific vertical. This is just my personal interest. Do you see any real good gamification came out of this whole discussion, or real application that actually changed the behavior?
Well, let's think outside the box. In the nonprofit sector, there was like the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? That we all participated in a few years ago. That's a gamified approach to donations. And we see it now with Twitch, what they're doing with esports fans who are able to donate proceeds to causes periodically. So I think that, game companies are very good at engaging customers on an emotional level, and that could be directed towards solving and helping very important problems in the world today. It's being done well.
The ice water challenge was very successful. Many levels of interest, like game element for sure, celebrities, and also the shock of being just immersed in ice water. So that actually is a good example. And Jim, have you seen any?
I know, certainly a couple of years back, gamification was, a big buzzword, and people were saying, all right, we're going to apply it to healthcare, we're going to apply it to education, we're going to apply it to all these things. And I don't know, to some degree, I'm a little bit more skeptical. I've seen people who have maybe built games that have tried to, take in real world things. Maybe it's, playing the stock market. And thinking that if we apply some of the game models to these elements, people are going to be more engaged and it's going to be more fun. And I've tried some of these things, and personally, it's to some degree sometimes it still feels like you're just slapping it on top of it. Maybe it's just because no one has
a bit artificial. Yeah,
like no one has done the right execution yet. Because if I wanted to play a game or enjoy myself, it's not like I would chase down and find these things to do, right? So I just haven't seen a great execution.
Fair enough.
I agree in terms of not a great execution, but a lot of the motivation, and there's a reference to a lot of the work that Amy Jo Kim is very, you can Google her name, she's talking about the motivation of people, curiosity, the competitive, etc. And when those are implemented well, when those motivations are implemented well, in different industry it works. A lot of time just people even just shy away from calling it gamification, just because for many people it doesn't necessarily means, a good thing.
Tainted word. So you still believe in it? You still believe there's opportunity in gamified different sectors, other sectors?
I think running those motivation with people, whether it's a simple leaderboard or the ability to understand where you are in the process of whatever you need to do, and motivating you to complete it, is good. It doesn't need to be a game, right? But those motivations are proven and are, as any good user experience, not easy to implement. I don't know that it can be an external service. I feel it needs to really come from the organization.
Barak, do you have anything to add?
Well, we have to define games because sometimes no, but I agree. But sometimes the games themselves are gamified. And some, if you take Pokemon Go, it's collections gamified. There's nothing else. It's just gamification and so yes, I do believe that it's still not dead, and there's a lot of and the incentives are important, but not always it's a game.
There's also, we talk about hardware, things like AR, VR, is pioneered with games as the first commercial adoption, but now used for other purposes. There's a company in Israel called FieldBit, which is taking AR glasses and deploying it with field service personnel. For example, Deutsche Telekom is sending people outside to the field to fix big, heavy equipment, and with the glasses, they can patch back into the headquarters to get the instructions they need to fix it on the first-time visit. None of that would have happened without games driving the adoption of AR and VR.
I've been a few years ago. I've been consulting for a drone development company from actually the army drones. I'm talking about civilian, but army originally from, and all the interface. It was really old-fashioned interface designed internally by the Israel aircraft industry, and they wanted to actually renew the interface. And we worked on developing a report based on experience from games, the interface from games, icons from games, control from games, and actually there's a lot of bridges between all the industries to learn from games, because things are optimized and developed, so it would be easy to learn, short learning curves. Those are the challenges that we're facing when we're developing games, and the rest of all the other industries, they are facing the same challenges, but don't have this expertise.
Yeah. So to build on that point, while I may be skeptical of the idea of gamification, it's no doubt that the game industry as a whole has driven progress in a lot of areas, whether it's mobile, I'm sure it'll be VR, that will be applied to other sectors. So if you look specifically at mobile gaming, because of how competitive the space is, because of the revenue involved, the degree of rigor in terms of analysis of the marketing channels, evaluating the ROI, all of this is being applied by other companies outside of the gaming space. Right? So if you look at a lot of the marketing execs or marketing teams that have really learned their chops at gaming companies that are then poached away by whether it's e-commerce, shopping, whatever companies that are looking to build their business on mobile, a lot of these skills and a lot of these capabilities are being started at games companies first and then being applied elsewhere.
One question for Jim. You're representing, China, money from China right now. Chinese companies, they started off having their own big domestic market. Challenging, yes, but they do have access to a pretty big market in terms of at least population. How do you see that impact their way of thinking in terms of when they starting up, approaching the market, when it gets to innovation? Where do you see that? You see both of the worlds, so
it's definitely a lot to cover there. And I think if you pay attention to some of the companies that are doing really well in China and that are starting to make inroads overseas, they really were able to establish themselves because China, to some degree, created a walled garden and kept out a lot of the Western companies. And so a lot of these companies in China were initially fast followers of what was going on in the West. But I think what you're seeing now is many of these companies, particularly, let's say, Tencent, Alibaba, they're innovating in areas that Western companies just aren't able to, maybe because of their market dominance. But some of these learnings are starting to be applied overseas. And so it's not just in terms of capabilities, but also an area that we focus on is M&A. Right? So over the last couple of months, over the last couple of years, you definitely see a lot of acquisitions coming out of China of Western companies. And part of it is the nuances of how high the valuations these companies are getting, and so they want to do some financial arbitrage, but certainly a lot of it is also because China at this point is so competitive for them, they're looking overseas to grow their businesses.
For Israeli entrepreneurs and investors, do you actually believe there's a DNA called being innovative? And how do you see a lot of the Israeli companies going after global market at birth?
It's the fact that Israel is a very small market, if anything, means that any company here, big or small, immediately needs to look outside. And for many years, and even now, the first thing you do is you look west. You look to Western Europe or the US as your first market. I don't see that changing very quickly, but even now, sort of the winds of change coming from the east are very apparent. Right?
You are approached by a Chinese company.
Yeah, we've done deals in China. Yeah. We are, I think, the first Israeli studio. Thank you, to actually get money for game development from Chinese companies and Japanese companies. But the first thing is to be aware that what you are designing, thinking about, and eventually developing needs to attract different people than the people that you see down the street, right? Your market is not, an Israeli market. It's different. For us, the rest of the world is the entire world. There's no Israel in the rest of the world in terms of our audience. And being able to provide a product, definitely a cultural product like a game, to a very different market than you would, to China as an example, just requires a lot of knowledge that I don't think we have. And
how do you acquire knowledge sitting here being surrounded?
Yeah.
How does that happen? How do you approach? How do you take the first step?
The first thing would be to copy.
Okay, that's a good answer.
And then to perfect, right?
To improve.
Yeah. We've seen that. We've seen what works and what doesn't work. And the point is that to come in without sort of a lot of ego about the product, to understand that what you see as a successful product is the right thing, and do a bit of innovation, kind of that 1 plus 1 thing in a careful way. Go there, meet with people, just understand the culture. I think Sean Lee said, be very humble about what it is, but try to understand that you want to do a product that would be successful there. So what are the things you need to do? See what's successful, play around with that, bring people and speak to people and see if you are kind of aiming in the right direction.
I think actually that the context, the Israeli gaming industry is an island. You have here the biggest concentration of startups in the world, and all of those companies that are mostly B2B companies, technology-driven. They are opportunistic. They develop a technology, and they don't really care which is the market where they will apply. They go to fintech and cybersecurity with their big data analytics, or maybe to gaming if they find a good opportunity to go there, or healthcare, or education. And at the end, what you have is a pool of engineers that move from one industry to the other. And at the end, you have a DNA of companies that are indeed that create some core technologies, but without understanding of markets. They have a lot of assumptions. And until they bump into someone who can actually teach them what's the reality, the Israeli companies are really are developing products, but they don't have the skill set to develop products and features. They are not good at that. So I think, you probably have. So I do believe that the most important things for Israeli companies is to find the first partner abroad. It's even more difficult and more important for them than the first financing round or the first prototype, which is usually, it's a healthy ecosystem of investors here. It's an healthy ecosystem of engineers. But the most important step in the life of your company is the first customer abroad, because you are touching reality. You're touching the real markets.
Yeah, just add on that in the last 12 months, we've had the rise of the multinationals coming to Israel. So over 250 multinationals, well over
380.
380. Already
mapping them, it's our job. We do that all day. So
exactly. Have major R&D centers through acquisition, or they set up an outpost, and Startup Central is bringing them. I wanted to say it. And the co-founder of Startup Central, is it Dan Senor?
Dan Senor, yeah.
Dan Senor wrote a book, Startup Nation. We all probably read it. He announced that he's working on a new book about how multinationals play a role. And he said that multinationals, we always think of them as customers, but in fact, what they can help us do is define the right problems. Because Israelis think like engineers and they solve very narrow solutions. But the multinationals can help us understand what is a problem on a global scale and run a commercial pilot to validate it and then get distribution massively. So they're all here. You're bringing them, and we should take advantage.
380.
If you want a couple of numbers, I will give you a couple of numbers.
Awesome.
Facts and numbers. 5,500 startups, innovative companies, so no service companies. If you sell pizza on internet, if you 3D print casing for your phones, you're not a startup in Israel, okay? So those companies, you have, it's the one company for every 2,000 people in Israel, which is a big number. The number of VCs, it's over 100 VCs for these 5,000 companies plus, so which is also the highest rate in the world. You also the access to capital and the angel community is huge, very active, and the investor confidence is the highest in the world after US, which is also, despite the political, I would say, surroundings, it's also quite an achievement. And there are many other numbers that we can dive in, but specifically for our discussion, I think it's important to really understand that one number could be very interesting also is that 70% something like that of entrepreneurs, they already had a job. And Intel... 70. So it's not like people coming out from the army directly or coming out. The people, the average entrepreneur is 38. So it's not young people. And when they had a job, it's exactly what you said. Intel has tens of thousands of employees in Israel. Microsoft has thousands of employees. Apple, Facebook, Google. All of those, actually, they educate people that become those future entrepreneurs. So it's not only crazy young people with great ideas, it's also people that touched the technical part of reality. And then afterward, we need to help them, and VCs do that as well, to help them with touching the part, the market realities.
To touch that point and what we discussed before, those 5,000 plus startups all face outside of Israel.
Yeah.
Again, Israel is not big enough, so they immediately think about how they can bring their product and services to other markets, which is a very, very different thought if you from companies that are in bigger markets that can self-sustain themselves, whether it's very big like places in China or the US where you can say, hey, Uber is a great idea, let's make the local Uber, let's make Didi, let's make that even bigger than Uber eventually. Or even sort of smaller countries like Germany, but if you do a startup there, your local market is big enough to self-sustain. Israel is not that. Israel immediately, your DNA is to think how I take this to a totally different market, a totally different culture, and that has a huge effect actually on how we think.
So I remember back in the 70s, you guys, Israeli have a female prime minister, and she, although very controversial, her name's Golda Meir, yes. And she was the one who actually voted against using atomic bomb. So I have great respect for that. I know she has some controversial histories and comments. What is the female character? In the entrepreneurial arena, are there many female entrepreneurs, or just a bunch of guys come out of military and say, "I want to start something"?
I want to answer about, because people think, it's a male's world, but if you check the intelligence units in the army, 8200 units, for example, which is the leading intelligence
8200, very famous.
8200. Entering this unit, it's about 50% of female.
Oh, I didn't know it's 50%.
But you have actually two tracks. You have more the intelligence tracks and the more the technical tracks. And then the males go to the technicals more and the female more to the... Actually, in our organization, we're about 45 people. I think that we have about 20 people coming from 8200, and I think most of them are female. But they are actually into the analysts, they are analysts, they are intelligence people.
Are there many, you have the numbers, are there many female entrepreneurs?
I think Israel is in the global average. Like a bit like you have to find the same amount of in UK, in US. It's not standing out.
Okay.
One of the things we do, we operate Israel's first commercial accelerator called the Junction, and we have a founders camp every 6 months where we select from 250 companies 20 finalists, and from 25 companies that will enter the next wave. So in the 20 finalists, we had one company led by female, and that's a 5% rate. I wish it were much higher. We all said it to each other. We must do more to bring more female entrepreneurs out. What can I say? I recognize
they fight the war together with you guys.
But it's a solution,
Okay.
No, it's a problem that needs to be solved, because Israel has a problem. We don't grow anymore. I mean, you have 5,500 startups every year. It's not growing anymore because you have a lack of talent. So you have to find those talents. Those are women, new immigrants, Arabs, Orthodox Jews, people coming from, from different various minorities. And we need to be able to integrate those people into the high-tech industry if we want to keep on growing. This is the secret of the future of this industry. If not, we just won't grow in numbers. All of these R&D centers from global companies, they come and hire the people. They put the money on the table, and then the startups, the salaries are going high, and you need to be able to feed this ecosystem with talents, and those talents will come from these communities. And women, of course, are the most obvious of those minorities, majorities actually in the country, but minorities as entrepreneurs.
I want to see if there's any question from the audience.
Hi guys, it's Doron. I have one comment and one question. First of all, Barak, the company that you were talking about was Clan Play and not Clan Chat. It's Leo's company, so we'll just do the honors. My question is, nobody mentioned VR. Is it like last year's fad? I mean, are you looking at it and not seeing opportunity there?
I think the best person to answer is Guy.
I see a lot of opportunity there. We're making revenues there, and it's a very clear path between, again, interfaces that were great in 3D but lacked the 3D screen, and now we're having that. Since the screen is new, it's really becoming a new media. So a lot of content, and when I'm in LA and I'm speaking to content developers, whether it's movies or games, you just see extreme excitement about just creating or exploring how to tell stories through the media, whether it's interactive or not. And when I was in China twice this year, you see extreme interest about the interface, the sort of the platform itself, and how that would play into the market. Huge opportunities. I don't think it's no longer just a thing of, maybe will happen or not. It's already happening and picking up very quickly. The opportunities there I would say 80% or even more of them are actually totally connected to the regular opportunities of mobile games, whether it's development of services and game development on PC and console. It's a very, very similar ecosystem. It's just a new way to tell your story.
I actually want to piggyback on that. So we had a discussion. I mean, thank you for the question, by the way. About 10 days ago, about a week ago, Xiaomi in China just announced their VR products. So the cardboard equivalent is already been on the market. It's sold for $7 roughly $7.5. And they announced a new product coming out in November, which is the Oculus equivalent with sensors. And that's sold for 149 RMB, which is about $20. With that price tag, there's already 1 million free sales online. So my personal recommendation is that if you have a good VR game, good VR content, this is actually a different sector than regular mobile game. So for regular mobile game, it is pretty hard to get into China market without a lot of effort, customization. But for VR content, there's still quite a lot of opportunities in the content space.
VR in general is one thing that can absolutely lead the go east, idea.
And US everywhere. Yes.
Yeah. And when you do that, you're actually getting in front of a lot of huge opportunities that I don't think that most people even know about or understand. Yeah. Super interesting market, and anybody that's starting a new company or thinking about expanding what they do, looking more to China specifically, with the help, with everything that was discussed in other panels, you can find there way more opportunities that you can actually sort of grab or be part of than ever before. Again, VR being one of the main things that's now extremely exciting over there and could be extremely relevant to the Israeli market.
Yes, I just got that number right before I came here. And I would not be surprised to see Chinese parents willing to spend $20 for a device that for their kids. So it's $20 is not a big amount of money for middle class in China.
It's again something that referencing Sean Lee, the way people consume their content, their games. Is very different from what we may know from the US, as an example. China is very different in that aspect as well. Part of the reason why VR is extremely popular versus the US and very, very exciting, even more than what we've seen in the US. Just different ways to use the platform, whether it's coming from mobile or from high-end PCs. And a lot of it is relevant, but there's also a lot of changes or a lot of differences, not changes, a lot of differences from what we have been learning over the last, 20, 30 years happening in the US. But I don't think anybody here is afraid of change, is afraid of looking at learning something new. So definitely go to China, visit there, get help, see some opportunities. New platforms are super exciting for very, very big companies there. You go, you meet people, you meet, the local YouTubes, each one of them, and there are 3 big, each one of them is bigger than YouTube in terms of reach. Mind-blowing numbers.
Yes. Any more questions in the audience? It's a great question, by the way.
Actually, moving on from the previous question, the next, what about augmented reality? What about AR gaming?
Just, for me, AR, a lot of people are referencing Pokemon Go. It exposed AR as a term to a lot of people. AR still has a long way to be implemented, but you can already see in more of the business sector with HoloLens, with other headsets, and already implementing that in business and utilities, like what Barak was telling us about. Super interesting, just seems to be just a very, very long-term opportunity.
I'll just give another plug for a local company called Step Inside, which it basically it's like a hologram. It's augmented reality that can be used for games naturally, but also for conferences or.
It's called
Step Inside.
Step Inside.
It's really cool. I think Mark Zuckerberg demoed their capabilities at the last Facebook conference, and this is many levels above what he showed.
The technical founder is actually the guy who developed the skeleton tracking in PrimeSense. He's a former PrimeSense employee, and I used to work with him very closely. As you're right, Step Inside is very, very. I've been trying this technology a year and a half ago already. Mind blowing, definitely.
Exciting.
So, on that question, most of the folks that I've talked to and in thinking through it, I think for gaming specifically, the opportunity, at least in the short term, is bigger in VR. If you look at the experiences that VR enable, it is very, let's say, an offshoot of what consoles can provide. So console gaming, when someone's sitting in their living room, they're looking for an immersive experience with a big screen, looking to some degree escape from a real world and jump into this world that they're playing. And I think VR lends itself very well to that. It's even more immersive than sitting in your living room. Whereas AR, by definition, because it's a mixture of this game world plus external reality, at least right now there aren't clear comparables to that. I'm sure that someone will come up with a killer app for AR, but it's just harder at least for me, to imagine what that might be relative to a killer experience in VR.
Especially since AR, as Guy said, it's not tomorrow. And when we're talking about small company developing content or technologies, they have a burn rate, and they have to survive until it generates revenues. So today, the people paying for AR and VR as well. Maybe with the PlayStation VR, we may have the first example of actually consumers paying for the technology and not investors or manufacturers. So AR is far from today, and the people working today on those technology and content on that, they need to survive until it becomes a big market, and that's very challenging.
We didn't talk about esports.
Esports.
Come on.
Okay. All right. Let's hear what you want to share.
Anyone for esports?
Just a local plug for Zen Gaming.
Okay. Advertisement time again.
So I am very frustrated because 10 years ago I founded the Israeli esports team that became the unmatched champion, and I created I had a startup creating a global ranking for esports, and I had all of the Chinese teams and all of the big European teams actually calling themselves global, world champions according to my ranking. And this company failed in 2008, and today I see the size of this industry, and I see where it would have been. So yes, esports is it's blooming now. It's in the last year it became like 10 times what it was 2 years ago, and I'm watching at it from where I am today.
Okay, then. I think that's it. Thank you so much for the insight. Thank you so
very
much,
guys.